You can speak.
Yes, and, I write as well. My penmanship isn't great, but, opposable thumbs and fat fingers,
Missing Link is Laika's latest and hopefully not last film about an intrepid explorer helping a Sasquatch find his home in the Arctic. It's all an adventure.
We're going on an adventure, Charlie.
Laika is a studio that I have the utmost respect for. They're like one of the only two studios to keep making stop-motion animation for theaters. But while some are fine for showing some imperfections in their work, Laika's all about making their movements as smooth and fluid as possible, to the point where a lot of people mistake them for CG. And yeah, they do use CG sometimes, but for the most part, what you're staring at is 3D printed, set extension, wires and armature, physically maneuvered, detail-oriented, giant skeleton actuality. It could also be my personal bias talking, as I did visit the studio when I was 10 years old. It was after Coraline, but before Paranorman was out and we weren't allowed to look at those sets. But we did get a good peek at the set of Harold and Kumar 3D Christmas, baby!
What the hell are you... Yeah!
Clay Cox.
Focus. Put your cock away.
But even besides that, they make good movies in general. Coraline is friggin' great. Paranorman and Kubo are both really solid. The Box Trolls exists. And now we have this one, which I have been interested in for a while, despite its terrible advertising. I know advertising and Laika has always been kind of a difficult combination, but wow did the trailers for this film look dumb. And the other marketing was just as bad. I mean, just look at the poster. Meet Mr. Link! Okay, this cardboard standee I found at my theater is terrifying. Like, it's taller than I am. I get that that's the point, but yeah. Okay, this is all just preamble. It's time for me to get into what I actually thought about the film. Well, to get the most obvious and unsurprising thing out of the way first, the animation is gorgeous. The colors are so vibrant, and the character designs are so varied and interesting. This was directed by Chris Butler, who also did Paranorman, and something I noticed about his films in particular is that he seems to go for a more abstract looking design, for both the characters and the environment. Oh, and speaking of, the backgrounds are amazing looking, and they're huge. There are some shots that feel like they would come out of a big Hollywood epic from the 60s or something, where a lot of emphasis is put on exotic locations, and the scale of giant ships and hills. That is one of the things I love about Laika, is how atmospheric they make their films. You really get a feel of the setting it takes place in. But that's also not to ignore the fluid character movement, and some really funny slapstick scenes. And the action scenes are really outstanding. There's a great one that takes place on a boat, and it turns into Inception for a minute. So yeah, animation's awesome, no surprise. It really is the main thing that makes the film enjoyable to watch. And in a way, it was kind of the only thing that made it enjoyable for me to watch. Because the rest of the film, while it's not painful at all, like no, far from it, it was so predictable. I knew literally everything that was going to happen. I knew every direction the plot was going. I knew how each character was going to grow and change. There was nothing in this at all that took me by surprise. I'd put the blame on the trailers again. They really gave away a lot of plot details and key jokes. Like, haha, the Sasquatch wants to be named Susan, but that's a name for Goyles.
Susan.
Yeah, Susan.
That is a girl's name.
Yes, that's correct.
Or, they need to find the land of the Yetis. Who knows if it even exists or not. Let's end the trailer by having them talk to a freaking Yeti. Oh, and speaking of, I noticed Yetis are a hot property now. Don't know when that happened, but it's happening. Now as for the characters, Hugh Jackman plays Explorer Man, who's gotta learn to stop being so self-centered in order to make friends. Even though that's a pretty simple trajectory to go to, I never got the impression at the end that he really changed all that much. I mean, I guess he does learn to care a little more about people, but it's also likely he might make the same mistakes again. Like, I don't know. He's not like a hateable character. I mean, he's kind of a dick, but he does have redeeming qualities. And Hugh Jackman's voice acting also makes him way more charismatic than he should be. There's just not a lot to get out of him as a protagonist, I think. And yes, he really is the protagonist, more so than Mr. Link. The lady who accompanies them is the widower to a grand adventurer who has them mapped out lead them to the Yetis. She's there to kind of be a maternal-ish figure in a way, but it's also revealed that she's the former lover of Explorer Man, and they have belligerent romantic tension with each other that I just didn't care about. Now as for Mr. Link himself, or Susan, which is technically the name he goes by, I was kind of afraid of him for being an annoying comic relief sidekick, but he actually was pretty tolerable throughout the whole thing. Although I do think they used the whole, "I get what you're saying, wait, no I don't," joke a little too often. I'm at least glad they didn't overuse the whole, "I'm a big, giant, clumsy goofball who accidentally sat on a chair and whoops, I broke a million things. Ruh-roh, I killed that dog. Oh well, I have no control because I am big." Now what about these three as a unit? They're bound to get some snappy quips and conversations with each other, right? Well, not really, because that's another big problem I had with the movie. A lot of conversations or scenes where characters interact feel kind of rushed, or cut down, or weirdly presented. Especially a lot of scenes between the lady adventurer, for some reason. Like earlier on, Hugh Jackman's trying to steal a map from her, and he's trying to act all charming and deceptive, making up a metaphor on the spot about how she's a caged bird who needs to get out and see the world. But it's obvious that she sees through this, and refuses. And then later on, once he steals the map from her, she confronts him and is pretty much ready to kill him. But then it's followed by her saying that she wants to join them, and how she thought about his caged bird metaphor. Weren't you aware that that was a ruse he was pulling on you? Because it seemed like you were. It also skips over her finding out that Mr. Link is a Sasquatch. Like it goes into her already knowing this information. I mean, it's not that essential in the grand scheme of things, but it would have been kind of interesting to see a reaction to that. And then a few scenes later, she confronts Hugh Jackman saying that you've been treating Mr. Link like shit, you've been making him carry all the bags and stuff. And I was like, how? What? There weren't really a lot of scenes dedicated to that. It felt really unearned. And then much later on, there's another similar confrontation about respecting Susan. And we already kinda had this before, it's not really any different from the earlier one. Despite all these montages of them globetrotting and riding boats and trains and stuff, I'm kinda surprised at how little the three interact. When I think back to other similar animated adventure films like The Emperor's New Groove, or The Road to El Dorado, or Ice Age 1, or Kubo and the Two Strings, the interactions between the lead pack are some of the best parts of those films. But aside from some interactions between Susan and the Explorer at the beginning, it's then just kinda done away with. I just felt really kind of underwhelmed by this. And I feel really bad about saying that to a Laika film. Again. They're a really hard-working bunch, yet they always have one film make less than the other. I wanted to walk out of this going, "Fuck yeah, that was a great fucking movie, you're all just letting die. Shame on you for skipping this to see Ugly Dolls instead of financing the next future classic from this studio." Instead, I'm like, it has beautiful animation, and a couple good jokes. Which I should stress, I'm making the film sound very humorless, and that's not the case. There are some lines, especially from Hugh Jackman, that are pretty funny, but a lot of other times it's dumber jokes like, "Look at how goofy that chicken looks, I haven't seen that in an animated movie before." There's just not a lot else for me to really recommend, but I do wish for more people to see it, cause god I don't want this studio to go bankrupt. I mean sure it has Nike shoe money financing them, but I don't know how much farther they could go from here. They might end up making a deal with Netflix or something, which is good for exposure, but I would miss seeing their stuff in the theater. So for their sake, and for the subjective opinion, I'd say check it out. It might not make a big difference, but a small difference is better than nothing. It would also be really upsetting if Ugly Dolls made more than this. 5 out of 10.